For joining us, Ambassador, and the floor is yours.
Well, thank you very much. I hope that you can hear me well. I thank you for organizing this intimate and virtual conversation on Europe as we approach the 70th anniversary of the Schumann's Declaration that has established the European Union. And it's happening in a very special circumstances. And as you said, we all hope that we can go back to some sort of normality in our life and have this event soon in Haifa. But it's very important that we are able to discuss about COVID-19 and the European Union, and the word solidarity that you mentioned is certainly a key word that is featuring very much prominently in the debate at the moment in Europe. The European Union was created following the speech of Robert Schuman in 1950, based on cooperation between member states and pooling sovereignty together. And the idea is that we should be able to do this in order to benefit member states and particularly the citizens of Europe. And this logic is very strong now, because the crisis we're facing at the moment with the coronavirus is a crisis that certainly cannot be solved by one member state, one country, one nation in the world. It requires a lot of cooperation. And this reality has become very clear in Europe in the course of the last weeks. I have to say that the beginning of the crisis, when member states started to be experiencing a very high rate of infection, starting with Italy, but soon afterwards many others, from Austria to Belgium to France, and no one was really spared. At the beginning of this crisis, there was certainly a bit of a shaky beginning for the EU coordination. And I think we have to acknowledge that this was certainly a fact, that member states initially were very inward-looking in a way, because the first things they tried to do was to protect their own citizens. And protecting citizens meant at the beginning to close borders, including borders inside the European Union, to ensure that they had enough equipment, both personal protective equipment, masks and others, as well as respirators, ventilators, testing capacity. So they kept these items for themselves. So there was certainly a very shaky beginning for the EU. Also because, as probably students know, health is not an EU competence. So it's not an area where the institutions have a big role to play. But I think fairly quickly we realized that every member state and the institution realized that alone we won't be able to do it. We are in this crisis together, and solutions can only be collective solutions. Therefore, we had a fairly good reaction by everyone, and a number of things have happened in the last few weeks. First, I think we realized that this is a crisis which is not only a medical crisis. Certainly, first of all, a public health crisis, but it's also a socioeconomic crisis. And therefore, the answer has to be a multiple answer. We need to be able to address all the various issues that the COVID-19 has created. So the first thing that we've seen, first of all, is that there's been solidarity, concrete solidarity between member states. After, as I said, a bit of a shaky beginning. We've seen patients from Italy, for example, from France, that have been transferred to Germany, that have a much larger capacity, a medical capacity, and they've been treated in the intensive care units in Germany. We've seen a country like Czech Republic or Austria transferring equipment and ventilators to Italy, to Spain, and other countries. And we've seen Polish and Romanian doctors coming to Italy to treat patients and support the Italian health system. This is an example of many others initiatives taken nationally by member states to extend solidarity with each other. But at the central level, very interestingly and very importantly, a number of initiatives have been taken by the European Commission and there are other European institutions. First of all, on the medical side, one of the things we've realized is that the European Union didn't have a stockpile of equipment in order to be able to face a crisis like this one. We were not prepared. I think we have to admit this. No country was prepared, but certainly the European Union was not prepared for that. So we've been able to create, for the first time, a stockpile of strategic and essential equipment to face the pandemic, which is now in place, mainly stocked in Romania, so that we can distribute the material to countries of member states that are in need. Also, we've launched 4 joint procurement. One of the problems that we faced at the beginning is that every country was buying on the market, on the international market, testing capacity, solvents, masks, ventilators, and there was a huge competition in Europe, but also, as you know, globally. So the EU offered member states to do a joint procurement, and 24 member states joined in, and together we purchased all these items. Of course, this creates a much better market condition, and it allows better prices and to distribute those items then to the member states that are most in need. So even on the medical side, on the emergency side, very, very quickly, we've been able to build up capacity that will stay with us for the future and are actually making a difference at the moment. Then, of course, there's the issue of European citizens that were stranded abroad by the COVID crisis. As you know, air flights stopped very quickly, and we had about 500,000 Europeans that found themselves abroad. So the question was how to bring them back home, and we coordinated together with the European External Action Service, we coordinated flights from member states to bring back all these people so that Europeans could join flights of other countries. And the European Civil Protection Mechanism was activated to actually fund and organize the flight. So we, as Europe, as EU, we managed to bring back almost 60,000 citizens to Europe and facilitating the return of others. Now they almost are back home. There's few that are still stranded, and we are collecting them. And actually, we also helped out a number of Israelis that were in Asia or in Latin America to come back home. And then I think the most important thing was of course, what is going to be with us for quite a while is the economic part of the crisis. The COVID-19 has created an unprecedented economic crisis in the world. The projection now indicates the Eurozone might lose 6.2% of its GDP. We'll have a very serious negative growth. And of course, the crisis is not over yet. So the question is how we relaunch the economy, how we coexist with the current medical situation. The Commission issued guidelines for countries to start to develop their exit plans. And it's based on a number of principles: the capacity of the health system, a decrease in the epidemiological data, and the testing capacity. So the countries are actually, based on these criteria, are introducing the exit strategy. They're easing the confinement and allowing the economy to start. But even when the confinement is there, we need to protect the integrity of the single market. We need to allow goods to be able to travel from one country to the other, so that the economic supply chain continue to function. So the Commission, at the height of the crisis, introduced what we call the green lane. So even if you have border closed, trucks with material and goods can actually cross the borders fairly quickly with a maximum checking time of 15 minutes. And this has allowed the economy to continue, and also some very important goods like medical goods, but also food supply, to continue traveling from one country to the other within the European Union. The same thing was done with cargo planes, so that the health measures taken were compatible with the flow of goods via cargo planes. But of course, the main thing is how we will be able to restart the economy and allow the productive capacity of member states to continue to operate and re-emerge from the crisis. And here we've seen a very strong reaction from the EU and its member states. The overall economic package that the EU has put together for now is almost 3.5 billion euros, which is the largest in the world, I believe. It's, of course, it includes both money that is set aside by the EU and also contribution by member states. The first thing that the EU has done was to allow member states to avoid the constraints of the Stability and Growth Pact. As you know, in the context of the monetary union, there are rules, fiscal rules that are very strict, and these rules have been lifted. We invoked the escape clause, which is part of the treaty, so member states can spend in order to respond to the crisis freely. Secondly, we also have introduced new state aid rules. Some of the industries at the moment is facing incredible challenges. For example, the travel industry, planes can no longer travel, and the airlines are in serious crisis. So by relaxing the state aid rules, we allow government to step in and fund companies nationally so they can survive. But then the question is, of course, how to inject fresh money and liquidity in the system. And here we had the European Central Bank stepping in with a very big program with about 750 billion euros, buying bonds of member states, injecting liquidity and avoiding a cash problem. Then the Commission started immediately by providing about 37 billion euros through the cohesion funds to assist member states and the industry and SMEs to be able to continue functioning, but also to inject money in the health system. The European Investment Bank, the EIB, injected 200 billion euros, mainly to raise funds to allow small and medium enterprises to continue to operate. And this is important because while the large corporations can perhaps more easily survive the crisis, the SMEs, which are essentially the main pillar of the European Union economy, have much more difficulty to do so. Then the European Commission also proposed a mechanism to allow funding for unemployment, supporting unemployment. This is the SURE program, which is funded by the amount of 100 billion euros. And this would allow member states to, that have already their own safety net, short-term work system, to receive funding to continue keeping the system running, and so people wouldn't lose their job. I think in Israel there was a similar approach. Now, the question that we have on the table at the moment is the question of recovery, because all these measures are there to allow the European economy to protect its assets and sustain the crisis as we move on. But we also need to think about the solidarity in relaunching the European economy. As I mentioned, we expect a decrease of growth quite dramatic. This is something that we never seen, and we need to relaunch the economy. So this is the debate that has taken place and is still taking place around the various options that exist. Some member states are promoting the idea of the so-called Corona bonds, which means mutualizing debt. Other member states have much more conservative views on this, but certainly there is an agreement that we need a recovery program, some sort of Marshall Plan, in order to relaunch the economy. And at the last meeting of the European Council, the European Commission has received the mandate to present a recovery program to the heads of state and government, that is able to relaunch the economy. And this is where we are at the moment. And of course, it's a very complicated discussion, no doubt about that. There are different views between the countries of the South and the country of the North, if I want to simplify. But there's unity on the fact that this is a crucial time for Europe. We need to be able to react. We need to be able to respond to this crisis together. Solidarity and togetherness are essential in order to create the instrument for relaunching the European economy and overcome the health crisis. One of the key tools that certainly will be used in order to move on is the European budget. The European budget is about 1% of the GDP of the EU, so it's a relatively small budget, and the discussions were actually ongoing on the budget for the next 7 years, what we call the multi-annual financial framework, the MFF. And the member states have agreed that certainly the MFF, the European budget, need to play a bigger role in relaunching the economy. So we have to see what will be the final outcome, but I expect that there will be a larger budget for the EU on the table. There will probably
So we lost you for a moment.
the capacity for us to move on potential. I think the European Union will be able to come out stronger out of the crisis, but we need to be able to respond to the request of the citizens. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Ambassador Giaufret, also for giving us a quick update on this question. I would like to, we have two bundles of questions. One is COVID connected and the other one is non-COVID connected. So I would start with the one COVID connected. And one came by one of our students, Omer, and I think it's fitting very much what you said in the end, and it's regarding the question if maybe it's a good idea to have a European tax. If there's something like a collective European tax, something that is not just taken by the member states, but something that is collectively connected to all European states.
Yeah, this is a debate that has started already much before the COVID crisis. It's about the own resources, as we call them in jargon. So the resources that go directly to the European budget. And initially, the European budget received quite a bit of own resources from trade, so that the tariffs were paid directly to the European budget, and so was the VAT, a part of the VAT. But of course, as the trade barrier was going down, the own resources were also going down. So we need to find an alternative. And this is a debate that is ongoing. One of the topics that has been discussed and might be actually come back to the fore is a possible tax on the financial transaction, a possible tax particularly on the big digital companies that are making lots of money online. And because of the nature of digital trades, they can be based in countries with very low taxes. So the debate is there. It's not an easy one because some of the member states indeed have a very low taxes for digital companies. There's a big American corporate that are actually based in those countries. And other countries that consider this is to be fixed. So I think that certainly this is one of the topics that is likely to be at the center of the discussion. And I personally think that without own resources and without finding a way, either via tax or something similar, to supply funds to the EU, we always end up having a very divisive debate among the net payers and the net beneficiaries of the European Union that need to transfer money. So I would certainly think this is something that will be more talked about now.
Okay, great. We have another COVID-connected question from our student Ying. And I think it's very interesting. Ying, I will open your mic so you can also ask it by yourself because you were interested in the role of media and politics. Maybe you can rephrase the question for the ambassador again.
I will try to make it brief and clear because as Chinese, when the breakout happened in China, I was in Israel. So the way I could follow it was through media. And then I could see two stages, very distinctive two stages. And I felt the media was leading like the trend of how people were feeling. Because in the beginning, there was a lot of anger, there was a lot of anxiety, there was a lot of criticism. And then the media was also turned, I mean, as the situation goes, was turning to like appeasement, like more peace and calm, and like showing gratitude or appreciation of people who are fighting in the front line. I mean, yeah, I'm talking about China, where media is more controlled or like more influenced. However, now things turn to Europe or Israel. As I follow the media, I still see shadows of it, let's say. I don't think all medias are, I don't know how to phrase this. I feel as that's just the question I'm throwing out there, or like I would like to ask Your Excellency, how like I guess in the Western world, how media, the role of media playing in the coronavirus, because I think in the beginning, even in this part of the world, there was a lot of anxiety as well, and then there was a lot of isolation of people to themselves, and people were like in like the beginning of the response as well, and even with the action of the citizens, as I observed, because I saw that happened in my country, then I observed how people react, like citizens react in regard to the crisis. It's very much influenced by the media. Like in the beginning, people were like, "Oh, this is not a big deal." Then no one is taking it like seriously. Everyone's going out and like partying. Then okay, now this is a big deal. So sorry, I wanted to phrase it clearly, but I don't think I did.
No, I think you did. If you allow me, it's a very important question. We're living in a society where information and disinformation are making a huge impact, mainly because social media have created a completely different media space. And we've been dealing with the issue of disinformation before the corona crisis. Because in Europe, we've seen that the number of media were operating in order to undermine our democratic institutions in Europe, and we wanted to, we felt the need that we need to get facts right, and as a diplomatic service, we also need to work on the media and disinformation side. So we have created in Europe a task force on disinformation, and this task force worked specifically on the issue of COVID-19. Because in the context of the health crisis, disinformation is not only dangerous for the institutions and the way citizens look at their own institutions, but it's also very dangerous for the life of people. You can really kill individuals by sharing false information about public and health issues. And we did, unfortunately, saw that there was a lot of information which was wrong, which was untrue, which was incorrect, and often this information was purposefully shared around. And we have produced a public report which is specifically on COVID-19, which is accessible to everyone, is on the net. So I can send it to the Haifa University, and they can share it with you if interested. We had to, unfortunately, we saw that some of this information against Europe was coming from Russia, and some of it, I have to say, also from China. And this is important that we are able to present it. But on the Chinese aspect, I think equally is important to say that when China was in the middle of the crisis back in January, the European Union provided quite a bit of support, material support to China, and China is now reciprocating. We've seen some support coming from China as well to Europe, and this is, I think, an important aspect that we need in this crisis to be able to work together in cooperation. And the European Union launched a an attempt to raise funds to produce diagnostics, vaccine and testing capacity and therapy. This week, on Monday, we had a big event in Brussels. We raised 7.5 billion euros to produce these items, and China came as well. There was the Chinese ambassador to Brussels, but many countries were there, including Israel. So we had the pleasure to have the foreign minister pledging 60 million euros for this. So only cooperation, international cooperation, will help us out. And it's important that we have accurate information to the citizens in order to be able to build that coalition and in order to be able to do the right thing in order to fight the virus.
Great, thank you so much. I would like to hand to Yossi, also one of our students. This was a question that also Hitam and Ali, other of our students had, going more to the direction. Now we talked before about European solidarity, right? But what we also perceive is a kind of this Brexit trend. Will there be also a poll exit, or will more and more countries leave? And will this be, as you said, it's a test for the European solidarity, but will it maybe lead to more countries leaving? Maybe you, Yossi, you want to rephrase your question a bit more in detail?
Yes, well, actually, I was interested if due to the coronavirus situation, the vector of the Brexit will continue and more states or countries will actually want to leave, or it will initiate some new solidarity in the EU and abolish these voices of Polexit and Spain exit and all of these voices of exiting the EU, like the Brexit actually.
Yeah, thank you, Yossi. I think that we have to imagine that we are about to start a very serious economic crisis. We have started a very serious economic crisis across the globe. This is not a European crisis, it will be a global crisis. And we don't know how long this crisis will be. We don't know how quickly we'll be able to relaunch the economy. So we don't know what will be the final effects of the crisis. But we know they will be very, very strong. And therefore, we know that economic crisis brings also political changes, political issues to the fore, as we saw it with the financial crisis of 2008. So here, the key is how the European Union will be able to respond to the crisis. How much innovative ideas and strong intervention we will provide in order to address the problems of the citizens. This will be very, very important to determine the outcome, particularly as you refer to. But I have to say that one of the things that we've seen is that the impotence of single member states to move on. You can close your borders for a few weeks, but then you know that you will have to reopen them. And in order to reopen them, you need to know what your neighbors is doing, whether the health system is now coping as well elsewhere. So you need cooperation. You need to have a larger group. Your economy is doing bad. Alone, it will be very hard for you to do it, even if you're a very strong country. But if all the countries around you are going down, you won't be able to sell your goods. You need to share your economic prosperity around in order to be prosperous yourself. And this is coming very, very clear. So I'm quite optimistic that the crisis as it is will actually bring new elements of cooperation, new element of integration, new element of support for the EU. This is why what we're doing today will be very important for tomorrow. And this is true for the EU itself, inside the EU, but it's also true elsewhere. The way the European Union will relate to Africa, for example, now, we don't know what the crisis will be in Africa. For the moment, it's been fairly contained, but it could actually move up. We saw that in Brazil and in Russia, the COVID crisis is going up. So we need to be able to work with the Africans for economic, for political, for values reasons. We need to work with the Middle East. We need to work with the Americans, etc. We need to promote international cooperation. So on one hand, yes, let's integrate Europe, but Europe cannot survive in a broader context.
Okay, thank you so much. We have a beautiful question from another student of ours, Yaron. It's about going back in time. Yaron, maybe you would like to phrase your question by yourself.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for the information. My question is it's disguised. So I asked the disguised one and then I asked the direct one. If you could go back in time to March 1st and to change some headlines of newspapers that describes actions of the EU and the EU member states, or describe the misactions of the member states, what would you change? This is the disguised question. The direct question, what are you regret? What are the bad things the EU done or didn't do, and the member states? What are the bad things they done during March, which was the most huge impact of the pandemic? What would you change if you could? What do you regret the most?
Yeah, I think your question is very true. That at the end of February, it was probably too late to be able to react properly. The world was not ready, Europe was not ready, and the moment that the pandemic exploded, and I'm Italian, so I've seen in my home country on the 21st of February, all of a sudden we realized that there were cases of COVID, but not one, many cases of COVID, and the day after the first person died. And in a few days, there was 1,000 cases of COVID. So we realized that the virus was with us, and now we know the more we learn about it, and we realize that the virus was with us for many, many more weeks before that. So certainly there was a lack of preparation by everyone. I have to say that the European Commission did ring the alarm bell in a couple of instances. The Commissioner for Crisis Management, Lenarčič, had already indicated that we were not necessarily prepared, that there was we need to do more, we need to have more meeting of the health ministers, etc. So what we I think collectively regret is that we didn't take the measures of the challenge we were about to start. And certainly we should have taken very tough measures at the beginning that at the European level that were actually taken late at the national level. And the closures of the European borders, which is also an extraordinary measure. For the first time, we closed the EU borders on the 16th of March. That was too late. At the same time, we know that as democratic countries, it's very hard to impose personal freedom restrictions to the citizens. And it's very hard to do it by a supranational authority if the national authority are not on board. So what we learned today is that we need to be able to create more awareness of the problems and be not only among decision makers, but also among the population so that measures can be taken collectively early enough. It's very hard to do it before the real things hit you hard, and then you can do it because you have the support of the citizen. But certainly what the Council has asked the Commission is precisely to design a crisis management plan at the European scale that we didn't have. No, we had crisis, we had an earthquake here, flooding there, a forest fire here, and we were able to cope with these things. But a big crisis covering the whole continent, we were not prepared, and this is what we need to do, and we were asked to do, and I'm sure that next time we'll be better prepared.
Okay. Great. I think it's a good moment to move a bit out of the COVID zone because we have another 15 minutes left. And I would like to hand it over this question to Omar and Paulina, our two students, because it was more in the direction of environmental policy, right? Which was really like a light tower of EU policy. It could be very interesting. So Omar, would you like to ask your question?
Yes, first, we see that environment gained benefits from this crisis. If someone Earth got benefit, and I'm writing now a paper about the 2008 a crisis, and I was a bit surprised to see that the main initiative of the EU was to promote environmental initiatives. So I'm asking, how the EU is now trying to leverage this situation, and everybody are much more aware what we can be, hey, the sky are clean, and what are the plans in this area?
Yeah, thanks. Key topic, environment. The EU, before the crisis, decided that the three fundamental priorities inside the European Union were the Green Deal, fighting against climate change and turning the Green Deal into our growth strategy, the digital revolution, and supporting fundamental values. Now, the Green Revolution, the Green Deal remains our priority. And this is what we are insisting very much. We need to stay the course. And actually, the crisis of COVID can give us an opportunity for this revolution to take place, because our habits have been changed completely. All of a sudden, we stay home, we don't go out, we don't use the cars, we telework. We want to go to normality, but also we are able to break our habits. So let's use this to introduce a new way of producing and developing our economy. Let's not fall into the trap that was the 2008 trap, where we had to relaunch the economy at all costs because jobs are important, but we haven't really used it to introduce a revolution of the economic system. So this is what our challenge is. Certainly, the digital revolution will help us. I don't think we'll go back to work as we did before. Certainly, I can see it in my own life. The teleworking and this type of conversation we're having has proved that you can do things without going to the office as effectively. You have to go to the office time to time, but you can do it also differently. And this is just a small example. Can we use a different way of urban transportation that is compatible with the social distancing and with the environment as well? This is what we need to do now. And I can tell you that the Commission and the European Union will insist very much these days on how to turn the recovery program into a Green Deal recovery program.
Okay. I would like to hand over to Dr. Alisa Bellotti. She is a postdoc here at our center. And Alisa, please raise your question.
Thanks, Katrina. My question was, you mentioned when you were speaking earlier that there have been some divisions exposed by this crisis in the EU between, roughly speaking, North and South countries. I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit more about those. And I'm wondering if these divisions that have surfaced during this crisis are the same or different divisions as we saw after 2008 and 2009.
Let's say the cleavage, the divisions are roughly the same as before. The countries that are a better fiscal situation, reticent, and the country that have a larger debt, Greece, Italy, Spain, and also France to a certain extent, are in a different position. But I think that there is a difference. There is a difference, and things have happened that were unthinkable before, and the crisis had an impact. In a way, on one hand, perhaps these differences are more acute because the volume of funds that are now at stake is much larger. But the positions have shifted because everyone realizes that we cannot go back to business as usual. the magnitude of the crisis is as such that without a proper reaction, we won't be able to do it. I'll give you an example. One of the things that we have agreed, and this is not among the things that I've mentioned before, but we have Europe some sort of a monetary fund, a European IMF, if you wish, which is the European Stability Mechanism, the EMS, which was created in order to respond to a Greek-type crisis in the future, without having to every time put together funds, etc. So the principle of this MES, the EMS, European Stability Mechanism, was that you would loan money to a member state in financial crisis with conditions attached. That was the deal. Very strict condition, as Greece had to go through a few years back. Now, member states have agreed that this system can be used for direct or indirect health expenditures without conditions. So they can actually draw up to 2% of their GDP in this big pot of money, several hundred billion euros, without conditions, because they have accepted that this type of crisis is different. And if your health system is in jeopardy now, it's not because you have misbehaved, but it's just because you had a very bad pandemic crisis in your country. And this is intellectually and philosophically a big shift for certain countries. And it's an indication that positions are shifting. And I think the German position in particular is shifting, particularly in the ruling party at the moment. So there are things happening in that respect too.
Okay, so we have another question, maybe leading a bit in the same direction, by our student Yossi again. We talked a lot in the last weeks in our course on European enlargement, and the students were also aware of the process that Turkey is going through. So this question is connecting to growing in the EU, right, and to enlarge it. So Yossi, maybe you might ask your question now.
Yeah, thank you. My second question regards Turkey and its application to be accepted to the EU. And I was wondering if the refugees of Turkey with the EU, led by Germany, will somehow in the future improve its possibility to be accepted as a full member, as it's going through membership in the process, I think, for the last 20 years or something like this. That's it.
Yeah, Yossi, first of all, the enlargement policy, which has been a very successful policy of the European Union, has been put on hold for a while because some member states were questioning the method. And this situation has changed now. We have reformed the accession method, and this reservation have been lifted. And yesterday there was a very important summit, not with Turkey, but with the Western Balkans. And this, in a way, was a very strong indication that we are moving on. Not that accession will happen tomorrow with Northern Macedonia and Serbia and other countries, but the process is in motion again. Turkey is a bit of a different story. It's a country that is certainly extremely important for the EU, economically and politically. But we did have a lot of issues with Turkey recently, and we need to be able to solve these issues that are related to geopolitics, to the migration crisis, and to the fundamental values. And we need to work on this. The refugee crisis that you mentioned, there was actually another pang of crisis just before the corona crisis exploded, with the refugees going to Greece. We have, first of all, to acknowledge that Turkey is hosting millions of refugees and is paying a very high price for this. And we have this agreement that is basically to assist Turkey with a strong financial support to assist these refugees in Turkey. And this is the approach we would like to maintain, and the conversation with the Turkish authority are continuing. Then there is the question of the geopolitical question that is also a very is a concern for us. The economic zone and the exclusive zone of Cyprus, and how you divide the Mediterranean and the hydrocarbon resources of the Mediterranean. It's an issue. We have seen that Turkey has been drilling into the economic zone of Cyprus, and for us is a big issue. Yes, of course, it's a member state. And then, of course, the issue of Libya, the agreement that was signed to define the economic zone of Turkey and Libya, which is another issue. So all these things are also important, and eventually, finally, the issue of values and fundamental freedoms and the rule of law is another topic. So we do have a very strong and heavy agenda with Turkey, but we will continue this discussion. I don't see at the moment the possibility of relaunching the accession procedures with Turkey in the immediate future. But certainly the conversation and discussion will continue, because Turkey is such an important country for the region and for the European Union.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you. We have another question from our PhD candidate, Daniel Reches, also European, that goes more back to the EU member states regarding EU member states calling the state of emergency. Maybe, Dani, you want to raise your question?
Yes, maybe it's a nice follow-up on the question you just answered regarding Turkey, looking at its neighbor Greece, and you already mentioned the refugee crisis. Greece is the state that I had in mind when I asked what should be the EU's response, the collective response to states that then break or violate EU law in the name of a state of emergency that, for example, the corona crisis gives them.
Yeah, a number of countries have adopted emergency legislation during the corona crisis. It's a very normal reaction, but the president of the commission and also the commissioner in charge of fundamental values, Randers, have always made the point that fundamental freedom and fundamental values need to be respected even in an emergency situation. So we have a couple of instruments to deal with this issue, which start from the principle that the European Union is a community of a union of interests, but also a union of values. So in order to be able to enter the European Union, you need to meet certain benchmarks, but also once you're inside, you need to keep meeting these benchmarks. There are fundamental two instruments. One is, of course, the jurisdiction of the European Court of Justice. That is final for European law. So all actions need to be compatible to the European law. And the European Court of Justice has been ruling on a number of cases that are related to what you just raised, not so much in the Greek case, but in other cases. So that, I think, is a very powerful instrument that we have. And this is why we need to protect the court, because it's essential for the unity of the legislation and for the promotion of European interests and values. And the other instrument is more intergovernmental. There's this article in the Lisbon Treaty that basically allow member states some sort of peer review of others when this mechanism is triggered. There's a dialogue that is led by the Commission on specific issues related to member states. No one has triggered this mechanism for this emergency legislation, but it's been triggered for other issues, so it could be triggered also for that. And these allow a process that can lead, in the extreme cases, to the suspension of the voting rights of member states. But you need a very strong majority among member states to do that. But certainly the fact that this process is ongoing exerts pressure and helps to clarify a number of issues and bring things in the right direction.
Great, thank you so much. I would like to hand the last question basically to Professor Stefan Ihrig and go back. So I opened your mic, you can go ahead.
Thank you. So my question is also Corona related, not a surprise. I myself come from a region with farming, a very rural region. So forever, really, for me, the EU farming subsidies have been a big question. And until the Corona crisis, I thought I had a clear opinion on them. But now, ordering food from my parents from Israel, from local farmers in our village, I do appreciate the EU farming subsidies on a totally different level. So for me, the question is, how do you see the future of these farming subsidies to develop? Because now, previously we always thought about, this concept of autarky and, producing in times of war. And now we actually had a crisis where local production was very helpful and is very helpful. Does this change the political landscape when it comes to these subsidies?
Very good point. Among the European Common Agricultural Policy, food security was always a key aspect, but certainly the crisis has reminded everyone that it's not only a theoretical objective in case of major war, but it can happen any day. So I think indeed there will be impacts, not only for the agricultural products, certainly for food and food products, but also for other production. If we realize that our face masks that are needed now, we need to wear every day when we go out, are produced in China or in India or elsewhere, outside the EU, we realize that we're missing a strategic asset that is not in our hands. So I think we need to review more attentively what is the structure of the European economy, what we are able to produce, whether we are ready to face big crises, certainly for food, but also for other items. And this brings the issue of the also of foreign investment in the EU. Are we ready to sell our key assets to foreign companies that perhaps are dictated in their decisions by not only economic reasons, but also for geopolitical reasons? So all this is triggering a very, very deep reflection, which had started before the crisis, but the crisis will accelerate it. The EU has always been led by the belief that you need to allocate the resources where they're most efficient, a liberal approach. So you need to move resources to research, to the digital sectors, and perhaps move from other sectors. I think we're looking here slightly different the way we operate. And the fact that we had to lift the state aid constraints to allow member states to put money into companies. The fact that some sort of low quality goods become so important for our daily life. The fact that actually agricultural production is essential. The fact that some infrastructures becomes key and that we need to control them. All this is probably will have a big impact in the way we imagine the economic role of the EU, and there will be a shift. And certainly for agriculture, there will be a much more supporter for maintaining an agricultural capacity in Europe.
Thank you so much. Our time is kind of up and I don't want to hold you here forever. I would really, really like to thank you that we could kind of grill you today and like ask you so many questions. Of course, we know it's not the same. Normally when you visit us on these days, on Europe Day, we have these warm meetings where you're very approachable to everyone. And I really remember vividly last year when we had all these 100 school kids here and you were taking pictures with them. So I hope that in the future, in 2021, we can again host a very beautiful Europe Day here at the University of Haifa, maybe on the topic of COVID-19. I also saw that we had external guests. We have people from Jerusalem joining and people from the new established diplomacy journey forum here at the university. So I hope we will all stay in touch. And again, thank you, Ambassador, so much that we could shoot you all the questions that we had. And I hope to see you soon in person.
Likewise. Thank you very much.
And happy Europe Day, all of you, 9th of May.
Yes, happy Europe
Thank
Day.
you so much. Bye.